So what does the Bible teach about premarital sex? I mean, what does it really say? Well, if you Google the exact words premarital sex, you're not going to see that in the scriptures, but you're going to see references it to in the terms of virginity. Virginity means that a woman has not been, or a man hasn't been with another. That's exactly what it says. In Acts 15, it says that we are called by God, as all Christians, to know and memorize Moses' laws that God gave him to write down for us to follow on what is sexually immoral. And we find that in Deuteronomy 22, it talks about virginity, and basically the principles were this. If a woman is not a virgin and she's wanting to get married, she has to tell her husband that she is not a virgin. The penalty is extremely severe in the Old Testament if she lied about that. And I would say the same responsibility for the husband too, is that he needs to let his future wife know if he's pure or not. And if they're not pure, it's extremely wise for them to get tested to see if they've got diseases that they're going to be passing on to their children and to each other. And so Scripture doesn't talk about that, but it's just there's a Scripture, and then there's also wisdom that goes along with those Scriptures. So I'm just speaking not as a commandment, but it is wise to get each other tested if you haven't been pure. The other thing it talks about, if the two come together as one flesh, then they are required to get married and never get a divorce. So that's the penalty if you do have premarital sex. 1 Corinthians 6 teaches us that, actually it's Ryan a little bit further. This First Genesis teaches us God's definition of marriage. It says, therefore the man will leave his family and form a new family, and he will go into her. He will cling to her, and the two will become one flesh, and they will be naked and unashamed. That's not talking about sex. Okay, all right, that's possible. You might have an argument there, but not much of one. 1 Corinthians 6 clarifies it and says, look, do you not know that if you unite yourself with a prostitute, you have become one flesh? The two have become one flesh. In essence, Paul was referencing that premarital sex is not really a thing, because it means if you've actually had sex with her, you are married to her, according to Paul. And that's a pretty serious statement. So he's saying, forget about premarital sex. He's saying if you actually go into her and you plant your seed into her, you are one with her, and regardless if she's a prostitute or not, regardless if she sleeps around or not. So the Bible's very clear on those things. And the Bible actually says that God's holy of holy men, the priests, are allowed to marry women, but they have to be virgins, and they cannot be widows. They cannot be. They don't call them non-virgins. They call them basically. They're not pure, in essence. They're no longer. They've been touched in that area. In fact, in Deuteronomy 22 says, even if you are found touching a woman, laying beside her, then you are required to marry her, because you have destroyed her reputation. Even though you may have not done anything, it sure looks like you did something, and you've destroyed her reputation. And back then, if you were not pure, you could not marry the elite. The elite were only the people who were the best of the best were looking for pure women, and the women were looking for pure men, and so it was a big deal. And that prejudice still goes on today. That they'll sleep around with there's the girls they'll sleep with, and then there's the girls they're married, and they're two different women until they get married. So just be aware of those things, and know the Bible's quite clear on that his will, God's will, is for the two to become one flesh in marriage. And if it's outside of marriage, then his will is for you to get married. And in fact, Apostle Paul says you are married. So what is it? I don't know. But what I do know is that there's some wisdom in there, and there's some responsibility in there, and I hope you choose wisely.